A cry from the rocks. A human follows the sound. The wind howled across the rocky valley. Sharp stones and broken metal pieces covered the ground, remains of a long-forgotten alien battle. No one lived out here now. No humans. No aliens. Just silence. But today, there was a sound. A human man named Cade was checking old communication lines. He worked for a rescue team that searched lost zones for broken tech, sometimes survivors. He walked slowly, his scanner buzzing in his hand, when something strange happened. He heard a cry. It wasn't loud. It wasn't close. But it was real. A small, weak sound, like a child. Crying. Cade stopped. He turned off his scanner and stood still. The wind moved again. Then the sound came once more. A faint cry. Like someone calling for help. He followed. Climbing over rocks and rusted wreckage, Cade pushed forward. The sound came from the direction of a large cliff wall. At first, he saw nothing. Then, near a crack in the wall, movement. A small figure peeked out. It was a child, but not human. The child's skin was pale blue. Big eyes glowing softly, thin arms, dirty face. The little alien looked up at him, afraid, then turned and ran into the crack between the rocks. "Wait," Cade called, out. "I'm not here to hurt you." He pushed through the narrow opening, ducking under low stones. Inside was a shallow cave. It smelled of smoke, dirt, and something else, like sickness. The child had stopped and was watching him from the corner. Then Cade saw her. A larger figure lay on the cold ground, hidden under a blanket of old cloth and leaves. She was breathing, but weakly. Her face was the same shade of pale blue. Her hair was long, tangled, and covered in dust. Her arms held something close. A baby. The baby was silent, too still. The older child crawled to the woman and hugged her. "Mom," the child whispered in their alien tongue. The woman opened her eyes slowly. She looked at Cade. He saw fear in her eyes. She tried to sit up but failed. Her body was too weak. Her lips trembled. Then she spoke. Not in English, but Cade's translator picked it up. "Don't take my children. Please." Cade raised his hands. "I won't, I promise. I'm not with the government. I just heard the crying." She looked at him, unsure. The baby made a small sound. A soft whimper. Cade stepped closer. "Is the baby okay?" The woman held the child tighter. Her hands were shaking. "I can help," he said softly. "I have food, water, medicine." She looked down at her baby, then back at him. Slowly she nodded. Cade opened his pack and pulled out a water bottle. He offered it to her, but her hands were too weak. So he carefully poured water into the cap and held it to her lips. She drank, just a little, then looked at him with tired eyes. He handed food to the older child, some soft bread, and a wrapped protein bar. The child didn't wait. They bit into it hungrily. Cade looked around. This wasn't just a hiding spot. It was their home. There were broken bags, a few cloths, and some burned sticks, used for fire. These people had been hiding. For days, maybe weeks, he whispered, "Why are you out here?" The woman struggled to speak. "We ran. They left us. I was with a caravan. When the father of my children died, they cast me out." "Cast you out?" he asked, shocked. "They said I was a burden. They said I was of no use now." Cade felt his chest tighten. The baby whimpered again. "I can take you somewhere safe," he said. "Somewhere warm. There's a shelter base nearby. You'll get real food, heat, medicine." But her eyes filled with panic. "No, they will take my children from me. They take mothers like me, I know. I've seen..." Cade frowned. He knew what she meant. The officials didn't like alien mothers who had no legal record. Some were taken for testing. Others disappeared. She was terrified. He nodded slowly. "All right, we stay here for now, but let me help you." Her eyes filled with tears. One fell down her dusty cheek. She whispered, "Why are you helping me?" Cade looked at her, at the child now sleeping in her arms, at the older one watching with hope. He simply said, "Because no one else did." She closed her eyes and breathed out. It wasn't full trust, but it was the beginning, and for the first time in many nights, she didn't sleep alone. The fire Cade built inside the cave crackled quietly. Shadows danced on the stone walls. The alien mother lay curled around her baby, both weak and silent. The older child, sitting nearby, still clutched the food bar like a treasure, but Cade's eyes stayed on the mother. She didn't just look tired, she looked hollow, like life itself had been draining from her slowly. Cade wrapped one of his thermal blankets around her gently. Her eyes fluttered open, confused at first, then soft. She didn't speak, but the way her trembling fingers held onto the blanket said enough. Her body was cold, fragile. Even the heat didn't seem to reach her bones. Cade dug into his emergency kit again and offered her warm liquid soup from a metal pouch. She looked at it carefully, then her lips parted. "For me?" "Yes," Cade said softly. "All of it." She drank slowly. Her hands shook. Some of the soup spilled on her cheek, but she didn't seem to care. The baby in her arms made a faint sound, barely a cry. It was too weak even to cry properly. Cade's heart tightened again. That sound shouldn't come from a baby. It was too soft, too close to silence. "I have some baby formula," Cade said, reaching into his supply pack. "It's for human infants, but it might help." The mother's eyes lit up with hope. She shifted and tried to sit straighter. Cade poured the formula into a small container, warmed it slightly near the fire, and passed it gently. She tested. It then slowly fed her baby. The baby drank weakly, but it drank. Her tears came quietly. She didn't sob, she didn't scream, but the tears flowed silently down her face as her baby's tiny lips moved against the container. Cade didn't speak. He just sat near, watching, waiting, giving space. These weren't tears of sadness. These were the tears of a mother watching her child come back from the edge. When the baby finished, she held the little one close to her chest and whispered something in her own language. Cade didn't understand the words, but he understood the feeling. She turned to him. Her voice was soft, nearly broken. "You saved her." Cade gave a small nod. "I only helped. You did everything to keep them alive. I just brought food." She looked at him for a long moment. "Most humans would not come here, and if they did, they would not help. They would report me. Or sell me. I'm not like them," Cade said. "And I don't want anything from you." "But they always want something," she said, voice shaking. "I don't," he said again. She leaned back against the rock, still cradling the baby. The fire's warmth touched her skin now. She looked a little less gray, a little more alive. The older child came over and lay against her side. She wrapped an arm around them both. After a while, she spoke again. "What is your name?" "Cade." She repeated it slowly. "Cade." He smiled slightly. "And yours?" She hesitated, then said, "Sihia." "Sihia," he repeated gently. "Your children?" She looked down. "The baby is Nia. The older one is Teko." Cade looked at them. "Strong names." "No," she said quietly. "They are small, but I hope they will grow strong, if they live." "They will," he said firmly. "Now that I found you, I'll make sure they live." She stared at him. Not with fear now, but something else. Something new. A question. A quiet, painful question she didn't dare speak. Then, slowly, she asked, "Why are you still here?" Cade looked at her. "Because I want to be." She blinked. "You don't have to stay. You could leave now. You gave food. You did enough." "You're right," Cade said, then paused. "But I'm not leaving." A long silence filled the cave. The fire snapped and popped softly. Then she whispered, "My mate died many moons ago. He was sick, and when he was gone, my people said I was useless, a broken widow with no value. They left me in the night. I begged them to let me stay, for the children." Her voice trembled. "They said find a new male or die." Cade clenched his fists. "That's not how any being should be treated." She nodded slowly. "I ran, hid, fed the children from my own body. But now, my milk is dry, and I am failing." She looked at him now with raw eyes. "I need help, Cade," she whispered. "But not just food. I need a protector, a male the world will believe, one who says, 'These are mine.' Then no one will take us." He was silent for a moment. "You mean a mate?" he asked quietly. She nodded, ashamed. "You don't have to love me, just pretend, for the law, for the children." Cade stared into the fire. Then he looked back at her and said, "I don't pretend." Sihia's breath caught. Her eyes went wide. She didn't know what to say, but Cade did. "If I say yes, I mean it." And in that dark cave, where the cold had once ruled and death had waited, something else now sparked, something quiet and human, a promise forming, a bond beginning, and Sihia, once abandoned, finally dared to hope again. The next morning came slowly. Sunlight filtered weakly through the narrow cracks in the cave ceiling, casting pale lines across the cold stone floor. Cade woke up stiff from the uneven ground, but his eyes went straight to them. Sihia, curled protectively around her two children. Daya the baby looked better. Still quiet, still weak, but her chest rose and fell gently. The older child, Teiko, was asleep on his side, one arm draped over his mother's ribs. Sihia, however, was already awake. Her eyes were open, watching Cade quietly. "You stayed," she said softly. Cade nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. "I said I would." Her lips moved like she wanted to smile, but her body was still too tired. She shifted carefully, sitting up with a wince. Cade moved to help, but she held up a hand. "I can do this." He respected that. She reached out and gently picked up Nia, holding her close. The baby whimpered a little, but it was stronger than the day before. Sihia offered what was left of the warmed formula Cade had left beside the fire. The baby drank slowly, and when finished, nuzzled against her chest. "Her color looks better today," Cade said, sitting nearby. "Yes," Sihia whispered. "Because of you." "No," Cade replied. "Because you didn't give up." A long pause passed. Sihia looked down at her child for a moment. Then she looked back up and asked, "Do you have children?" Cade shook his head. "No, never. Married." She tilted her head slightly, her eyes soft. "You are kind. You would have made a good father." He didn't answer right away. Something in him stirred at her words. They weren't flirtation. They weren't manipulation. They were just honest, gentle. Suddenly a cough broke the quiet. Teiko was waking up, and it wasn't a good wake-up. His chest wheezed, his breath shallow. He tried to sit up but groaned, coughing again. Cade rushed over. "Hey, easy there, buddy." Sia reached for her son, worry on her face. "He's been sick for days. Fever comes and goes. I thought it would pass. But," Cade touched Tico's forehead, "he's burning up." He checked his medkit, pulling out a small scanner and a vial of antibiotics that could work across species. "I don't know if this is safe for his kind," he said, "but I don't think he'll survive the night without something." Sihia didn't hesitate. "Give it to him." Cade injected a small dose carefully. Teiko whimpered but didn't resist. His body was too tired. Cade gave him water and held him close, rocking gently. The boy leaned into his arms like it was the first time he had been held by someone warm in weeks. Sihia watched in silence. She didn't speak. She didn't move. But tears began falling down her face. Slow, full, silent tears. Her hands trembled as she clutched Nia tighter. Cade didn't say a word. He just kept holding Teko, keeping the boy steady, whispering small things like, "You're safe now. It's all right. I've got you." When the boy fell into a light sleep, his breathing a bit easier, Cade slowly laid him back down beside Sia. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand. They never had this, not even with their father. "He didn't hold them?" Cade asked gently. "He didn't know how," she said. "He provided food, shelter, but he never truly saw them." Cade was quiet, letting her speak. She continued, voice shaking. "When he died, I felt fear, yes, but also something else, freedom and guilt for feeling it." Cade looked at her. "You don't have to feel guilty for surviving." She shook her head. "It's not just surviving anymore. Not with you here. You didn't just help. You gave them what no one ever has. Safety. Love." Her eyes locked on his. "They need you. I need you. Not as a visitor. Not as a savior. As family." Cade's heart pounded. He hadn't come here for this. He was a scout, a worker, a man who wandered alone, but now in this broken cave, with an alien mother and her sick children, something deep inside him shifted. He looked at Teko sleeping peacefully, and then at the baby Nia, wrapped against her mother's chest. Finally, he looked at Sihia and said the words, "Then let's be a family." She blinked, stunned. "You mean it?" He nodded. "I'll stay. I'll help raise them. I'll protect them." A sound escaped her lips, half a breath, half a sob. She whispered, "Then I will give you everything I have." She leaned forward, resting her head lightly against his shoulder, not for warmth, not for shelter, but for the first time, for trust. And Cade let her rest there, knowing his life had changed forever in that dark cave of stone, smoke, and love. Wind screamed through the cracks in the stone, carrying ice with it. The sun had vanished behind thick black clouds, and snow fell hard, covering the world in white. The cave, once dry and still, now shook with the force of the outside storm. But inside, the fire burned strong. Cade had used all his fuel packs to keep the warmth alive, and he sat near the flames, watching over the sleeping alien family. Sia curled close to the wall, her arms wrapped protectively around baby Nia. Teko, still weak but breathing easier, slept with his head resting near Cade's knee. The storm had trapped them. They couldn't go anywhere now. Not for food, not for supplies, not for help. But that wasn't what scared Sihia most. It was the silence between the gusts of wind. The deep, heavy silence where her thoughts echoed. Too loud. She didn't fear the cold. She feared losing what she had just found. Her mind replayed Cade's words from the night before. "Let's be a family." No one had ever said that to her. Not her clan. Not her old mate. No one had offered to stay, especially not a human. But now he had, and the fear inside her whispered, "It's too good. It won't last." Cade added more sticks to the fire. He looked at her quietly, noticing the way her eyes stayed wide, even in the warmth. "You're still scared," he said gently. She hesitated, then nodded. "Not of the storm." He waited. She finally spoke. "I've lived through hunger. I've lived through being thrown out like garbage. But I don't know how to live through hope. I don't know how to trust it." Cade leaned closer. "It's okay to be afraid, but you're not alone anymore." Sihia looked at her children. "That's what makes it worse," she whispered. "If I lose this, if they lose you, it will destroy them and me." "You won't lose me," Cade said firmly. "No matter what happens outside, I made a promise." She turned to him, her voice small. But you're human. You could leave. Go back to safety, to your world. You don't belong here. Cade shook his head. I belong where they need me. Suddenly, the wind outside roared louder. Snow flew into the cave entrance in sharp gusts, making Sia flinch and tighten her grip on Nia. Cade stood up and moved quickly, pushing a large metal panel across the entrance. He braced it with broken rocks and whatever weight he could find. It wouldn't hold forever, but it would slow the storm. When he returned to the fire, Sia was shaking. You shouldn't waste your strength on us. You're not a waste, he said without hesitation. Sia held her baby tighter. Nia let out a soft cry, her tiny hands curling into her mother's tunic. Cade handed Sia another warm blanket and sat beside her. She looked down at Nia, then turned to him with eyes full of fear and something else. A desperate need. If I die, she whispered, will you raise them? Cade blinked. You're not going to die. But if I do, she insisted, promise me. He didn't answer right away. Then he reached out and placed his hand over hers. I swear, if something happens to you, I'll raise them like my own. Sia's lips trembled. She nodded, biting back tears. Thank you, she whispered. Then, after a moment, she asked, something she never imagined she'd say. But if I live, will you still stay? Not just for them. For me? Cade looked at her carefully. Do you want me to? Her voice cracked. Yes. I want more than just a protector for my children. I want a mate who sees me, a partner who stays because he wants to, not because I begged. He didn't speak for a long time. The fire popped, the wind howled. Teko shifted in his sleep. Nia whimpered and settled again. Then Cade moved closer. He took Sia's hand and whispered, Then I'll stay for all three of you, because I want to, not because I have to. Her eyes filled with tears. Not from pain, from relief. You're not afraid? She asked. I'm terrified, Cade admitted. But I'd rather be afraid with you than safe without you. Sia leaned into his shoulder, and he let her. They stayed like that, silent, holding each other in the flickering firelight. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside the cave, something stronger had been lit. A connection born not from words, but from survival, from quiet kindness, from shared fear. And for the first time since she was cast out, Sia didn't feel like just a mother hiding in a cave. She felt like someone who mattered. The storm had passed by morning, leaving behind a world of white silence. Snow covered everything outside the cave like a blanket, but the air felt calmer now. The fire had burned low, and Cade quietly stoked it back to life. Sia sat beside him, still holding baby Nia close to her chest, wrapped in layers of cloth and blankets. Teko was awake, sitting up and slowly eating a small piece of protein bread. His color had returned slightly and his eyes looked brighter. For a moment, the cave felt peaceful, like a small, secret home in the middle of nowhere. Cade stood and stepped outside to check the sky. The wind had settled, the clouds were clearing, but what he saw made his stomach twist. A blinking red, light in the distance, moving fast. Not a storm, not a bird. A patrol drone. And if a drone was here, the patrol ship wouldn't be far behind. He rushed back inside. Sia, he said, his voice tight. We have a problem. She looked up quickly, her arms tightening around the baby. What is it? A patrol is coming. Government. They scan abandoned zones for life signs. I'm registered, but you're not. If they find you undocumented. He stopped. He didn't want to say the words. But Sia understood. They'll take me. And the children. Cade nodded. They'll say it's for safety. But we both know what happens. Her face went pale. She looked down at Nia and then at Teko, who was now watching with wide, scared eyes. I've seen them take mothers before, she whispered. No one ever saw them again. Cade looked around, thinking fast. They're coming here because of the heat signature. They'll arrive in minutes, maybe less. Sihia crawled forward suddenly and grabbed his arm. Her fingers were cold and trembling. "Tell them I'm yours," she said desperately. "Say I'm your mate, that these children are yours. It's the only way they'll leave us alone." Cade's eyes widened. "They'll question it. I have no record of a wife." "Then make one," she pleaded. "Please, Cade. I'm begging you. They only care about ownership, not truth." The word ownership stung him deeply. She wasn't property. She was a person, a mother, a fighter, someone who had survived when no one else would have. But she was right. If he didn't act fast, they'd take her anyway. Cade opened his wrist communicator and began forging a temporary union file. Legal, on emergency terms. He input her name, attached the children, marked the union as lifemate and dependents. He paused when it asked for a reason. Then he typed, "Human-alien family formed during rescue operation." Outside, a low hum filled the air. The patrol ship. Sihia pressed her face against his shoulder. "Don't let them take us." "I won't," he whispered. He turned to Teko. "Stay, close to your mom. No matter what happens, don't speak unless they ask you." Teko nodded, fear in his eyes but trust too. A shadow covered the cave mouth. A voice boomed through a speaker. "Human presence confirmed. Identity, Cade Tellis. Please step outside for verification." Cade walked toward the entrance and pulled the metal sheet aside. The patrol ship hovered just above the ground, dust swirling beneath it. A tall officer in a silver suit stood beside the open ramp holding a scanner. "State your situation," the officer said. "I was doing recon work," Cade answered. "Found survivors, took shelter during the storm." The officer raised a brow. "Survivors?" "My wife and children," Cade said without blinking. "We got separated from the evac group weeks ago." The officer looked past him toward the shadowy cave. "You have no marriage on file?" "I filed emergency registration 10 minutes ago," Cade replied. "Check your system." The officer tapped something on his wrist scanner. A few seconds passed. Then he said, "Unit confirms. Emergency union request pending. Status, under. Preview." He looked Cade in the eye. "You know what happens if this is false?" "Yes. I go with you. And them? They stay with me. No matter what." The officer stared at him for a long moment, then sighed. "You really willing to give up your name for them?" "I already have," Cade said. Silence. Then the officer spoke into his comms. "Lifeforms cleared. No action required." The ship lifted slowly. The officer gave Cade one final look, then turned and walked away. As the ship flew off into the clouds, Cade stood there in the snow, chest rising and falling. Sihia appeared behind him, holding Nia in her arms, with Teko clutching her side. "You did it," she whispered. "They believed you." "I meant every word," Cade said without turning. She stepped beside him. "Even the part about being my mate?" He finally looked at her, eyes steady. "Especially that part." And as the snow gently fell around them, 3 shadows stood together, no longer strangers, no longer alone. They were a family now, and the world would have to accept it. The patrol ship was gone, but the danger wasn't. Cade knew it the moment his communicator buzzed again. A message flashed. "Union request denied. Non-citizen alien subject not eligible for mate registration." Without approval from central authority, his stomach sank. It didn't matter that he had held her through the cold, fed her children, or risked his own freedom. To the system, Sihia was still illegal, and the children didn't exist. Cade stared at the message for a long time before, slowly walking back into the cave. Sihia looked up right away, her eyes searching his face. "They didn't accept it, did they?" He shook his head. "They rejected the union, said you're not eligible." Her shoulders dropped. She held Nia closer, as if afraid someone might snatch her any second. Teko sat on the ground, quiet, confused. "What does that mean?" he asked softly. Cade crouched beside him and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "It means we're going to have to fight for your place in this world." Sihia's voice broke. But how? You saw how they looked at me. I'm not even a person to them. You are to me, Cade said firmly, and I'm going to prove it. Later that day, they left the cave. Cade carried Nia, while Teko walked with Sihia. He led them through the rocky paths, then across the icy plains, until the outline of a human settlement came into view, a small outpost with gray towers and guarded gates. It wasn't home, but it was where the law lived. If they were going to change anything, it had to start here. As they reached the gate, soldiers pointed weapons, shouting for identification. Cade raised both hands and showed his ID. I'm requesting entry for an emergency appeal under Article 9. That made them pause. Article 9 was rarely used. It allowed one citizen to request legal recognition of a non-citizen family if immediate harm or injustice was involved. It was old, messy, and almost always rejected, but Cade didn't care. They had to try. They were escorted inside and kept in a cold waiting room for hours. Sihia sat on the floor with the children, silent, holding their small hands. Cade stood at the glass window, staring at the officers behind it, waiting for someone to call his name. Finally, a door opened, and a voice said, "Cade Tellis, you may speak." He turned to Sihia. "I'll fix this." She nodded, though fear lingered in her eyes. Cade stepped into the hearing room. A single woman sat behind a panel. A recorder floated beside her. "State your case," she said without emotion. "My name is Cade Tellis," he said clearly. "I request full legal protection for my mate Sihia and her 2 children, Nia and Teko." The official frowned. "Species? Unknown exact. Origin," he admitted. "But peaceful, intelligent, a survivor. Her mate died. Her people abandoned her. She's done nothing wrong. I found them hiding, starving, and I took them in." The woman blinked slowly. "You say she is your mate. You understand the legal implications?" "Yes," Cade replied, "and I stand by them. There is no formal record of marriage, no citizenship. She cannot read or write our language. She offers no economic value. What makes you think the system will allow this?" Cade's jaw tightened. "Because I do." She raised an eyebrow. "I'm not here to ask if she fits your rules," Cade said. "I'm here to tell you that she is already my family. Those children are already mine in every way that matters. I feed them. I shelter them. I stay up all night making sure they're still breathing. What more do you want?" The woman looked unimpressed. "Feelings don't change policy." Cade leaned forward. "Then maybe your policy is broken." Silence filled the room. Then the woman sighed. "Your request is noted. A decision will be made in 72 hours. Cade returned to the waiting area with heavy steps. Sihia looked up immediately. "What did they say?" "They'll decide in 3 days. And if they say no, then we run," Cade said without hesitation. That night they were given a cold room in a temporary shelter. Teko slept beside Cade, while Sihia cradled Nia in the corner. The air was still, but none of them felt at peace. In the middle of the night, Sihia quietly crawled over to him. "You shouldn't have done all this. You could lose everything." He looked at her, tired but steady. "I've already gained more than I ever had." She touched his hand softly. "I've been called many things, slave, burden, breeder, but never wife." "You're not those things," Cade said. "You're their mother, and you're mine if you'll have me." Sihia's eyes welled with tears. "Then I do. I choose you, even if no law ever does." And as the human systems decided their fate, inside that cold room, love had already made its choice. 3 days passed like 3 years. Every hour felt longer than the last. Cade, Sihia, and the children remained in the shelter room, waiting, hoping, fearing. Guards brought them food but never spoke. Officers passed the door but never looked inside. It felt like they were ghosts in a system that wanted to forget them. Teiko stayed close to his mother, silent, watching everything. Nia grew stronger, little by little drinking the human formula and sleeping with peaceful sighs. And Cade, he didn't rest. He stood by the window, eyes scanning the sky as if the answer would come from above. On the fourth morning, the door finally opened. A woman in uniform stepped in, holding a digital tablet. Her face was unreadable, her voice flat. "Cade, tell us. Come with me." Sihia reached for his hand, but he gave her a small nod and a soft squeeze. "I'll come back," he said gently. "No matter what." She looked down and whispered, "Even if they say no?" "Especially then," he answered. Cade followed the officer through long gray halls until they entered a chamber, cold, tall, with empty seats lining the walls. At the far end sat the same councilwoman he had spoken to days ago. A panel of 2 more officials now sat beside her, each with the same hard expression. The room smelled of metal and power. "You requested a special family claim under Article 9, the main woman began. "We have reviewed your evidence, personal statement, and background check." Cade nodded once. "Before we give our decision, do you have anything else to say?" Cade stood tall. "Only this. Your laws may say she's not one of us. That her children don't count. But I say, family isn't made by papers, it's made by love, by choice, by sacrifice. I've already made mine. You can deny my request, but you can't break my promise." There was silence. Then the councilwoman turned her eyes to the screen and tapped her finger. The hologram blinked. Request status approved. Cade blinked. He stared for a second, not understanding. "You approved it?" he asked. She gave the smallest nod. "Your dedication and record made it impossible to deny. Sihia and her children will be granted conditional family protection under your name. They are now legally recognized under the Earth Settlement Protection Act as your dependents." Cade exhaled, a shaky breath of relief escaping him. "However," she added, "they must remain within registered human zones. Any violations, and the protection ends." Cade didn't care. "We'll follow every rule. You may return to them now," the officer said. Cade turned without another word and rushed back down the halls. His heart raced as he neared the shelter room. He opened the door and found Sihia already standing, eyes locked on his. She saw his face and gasped. Teiko sat up quickly. "What happened?" Cade smiled, chest rising with joy. "They approved it." Sihia's hand flew to her mouth. Her legs gave out and she dropped to her knees, crying silently. Tears poured down her cheeks, tears of disbelief, of safety, of something she never thought she'd feel again. Teiko ran to her and hugged her tightly. Cade stepped in, knelt beside them, and wrapped them both in his arms. "We're safe now," he whispered. "You're mine. All of you." Later that evening, they were moved into a proper residence unit, a small home near the outer colony wall. It had real beds, a heater, a stove. Teiko ran from room to room, amazed by every corner. Nia slept peacefully on a soft blanket, her tiny chest rising and falling in rhythm. Sihia stood in the doorway of the bedroom, staring at it all in disbelief. Cade stepped beside her. "What are you thinking?" "I never imagined this," she said, her voice soft. "Not after everything I lost." "You didn't lose everything," he said. "You still had your children, and now you have me." She looked up at him. "You didn't just give me food or shelter. You gave me something I didn't even realize I needed." "What's that?" She smiled faintly. "A future." He touched her cheek gently, his fingers tracing the edge of a healed scar. "And we're just getting started." That night, the family ate their first meal together at a real table. The lights were dim but warm. Outside, the stars blinked quietly in the night sky. Teiko talked more than ever, telling Cade how strong he wanted to grow. Sihia laughed, a sound Cade hadn't heard from her before. It wasn't nervous or weak. It was alive. When the children were finally asleep, Sihia sat beside Cade on the edge of the bed. Her hand rested on his. "You said something back in the hearing," she murmured. "That family is made by love, not papers." She looked at him. "Does that mean you really love me?" Cade turned to her. "It means I want every tomorrow with you." Her eyes shimmered. "Then come to bed, husband." And as the light went out, in a small home on a distant planet, a human and an alien mother, once strangers, now family, held each other beneath a quiet sky, their hearts no longer hiding, no longer afraid. They had fought the system, and won. But more than that, they had found something rare in a cold galaxy. Love that crossed stars, fear, and blood. A new beginning. Together.